Ladies and gentlemen, the following is scheduled for one fall. It is time for That Way Cool Wrestling Show! Hey, everybody. I want to welcome everybody here to That Way Cool Wrestling Show. My name is Danny J, along with LeGrand Onslaught Jackson.
What's up?
We have Mad Mark Lindsay in the house.
Hey now!
Oh my God, he's so fucking excited. And we are live today. We are live on YouTube. We have such a great guest on here. We're talking to Mid-South WWE superstar Reno Riggins in the house. Reno, welcome to That Way Cool Wrestling Show.
Thanks for having me today. Looking forward to it here on an early Saturday morning.
I know it's a little early for you. I do appreciate you coming on. He is definitely a couple time zones over, so thank you for joining us very early this morning. For those of you who are just trying to catch up or whatever on That Way Cool Wrestling Show, make sure you go on DJB Productions on YouTube, log in, subscribe. You can check out all the shows there. There's also thatwaycoolwrestlingshow.com. So you can go in there and check out all the videos. We tend to put them up there once they're ready. And we are on all the podcast formats, including Spotify, Google Play Music, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Caster, Radio Blast, and much, much more, all courtesy of Anchor.fm. So thank you for joining us today. We have Reno Riggins in here. We're going to have a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of great stuff here. Reno, for what people, a lot of our fans, we have older and younger fans on the show. So what happens is a lot of our stuff tends to gravitate towards the late 80s, mid to late 80s, early 90s. And then we go from there. I know we talked off the air and we said that's more your time period. If you could, in a general sense, if you can give our listeners a background as to who Reno Riggins is.
Well, I'll tell you, Reno Riggins started wrestling in the late 80s. Grew up here in Nashville, Tennessee, and of course got a full heavy dose of Mid-South wrestling with guys of the like of Jerry the King Lawler and Dutch Mantell, Bill Dundee, Jerry Jarrett, Tojo Yamamoto. That's the gentleman who trained me. And so just growing up here in the South, wrestling here at the Nashville Fairgrounds Sports Arena was such a great time in the world of professional wrestling, because every Saturday night you got to go and see your Hulk Hogan's. You know, everyone has a different Hulk Hogan and a Ric Flair that they really gravitated towards in inspiration of becoming a wrestler. And so every Saturday night we got to see them, here locally. And it was a lot of fun. You guys having a technical issue?
Yeah, there we go. You're good.
All right, good. Okay. All right. I saw that look of bewilderment and confusion.
Hook.
Reno, you're going to discover that Dan himself is a technical issue.
Oh, golly.
We're good. So please progress.
And so just growing up, I grew up as a wrestling fan. And, seeing, I guess in my teenage years when the Rock and Roll Express really kind of came on the scene and really took the wrestling world by storm. And then you had the Fabulous Ones with Stan Lane and Steve Kearns. Yeah. They were a strong influence, because here I am a teenager at that time. And these guys are wrestling rock stars. And who doesn't want to be a wrestling rock star? Everywhere those guys went, they were treated with great respect and treated with, just as being a full-blown rock star. So being an athlete and a rock star is a culmination of, I guess, every young adolescent's fantasy of what they want to do when they grow up.
Now, and it's funny when you say that too, because you're talking about some guys that are, like I said, are legends in this business. And when you say the word rock star, that brings it back to a lot, because, and I don't think it's not so much today as it was back then, but they literally were considered rock stars in a sense, in as far as like how the fans wanted to interact with them and be with them. So to see those guys, and they're not much older than you, are they, Reno?
No. Actually, I've wrestled Ricky and Robert hundreds of times. I've wrestled Stan Lane and Steve Kern a few times. I actually wrestled Stan quite a bit when he was with the Midnight Express,
Right.
with Bobby Eaton as well in WCW and Smoky Mountain Wrestling. So, actually having a few years seeing those guys as a fan, and then stepping in the ring and being with those guys was kind of that it moment that I think every wrestler at some point, when they set out their wrestling career, there's that moment to where they look around and go, man, this is really happening. and it was pretty cool. I always tell the story, and I'll skip around here a little bit, but my really it moment, I think, for me, like I said, I didn't have a connection in the wrestling business. I was just old Neil Hargrove from Nashville, Tennessee,
Right.
and jumped into the wrestling business. And next thing you know, about 2 years later, I'm at WWF.
Right.
And I had was on we had earlier on a Saturday, we had wrestled at the Boston Garden, at the old Boston Garden in Boston, Mass. And of course, I grew up as a Celtics fan, big Larry Bird fan, so that was kind of an exciting thing for me, And so I get there to the building, and we're doing like a 1 o'clock matinee, and I'm wrestling Virgil, and so and it's sold out, and so here you are, you're walking into the Boston Garden, seen it millions of times on television, and here you actually are, and then we finished that event, took the shuttle to the airport, got on a private jet, went to New York City, and did Madison Square Garden that night. So I'm on a private jet, and there's Bret Hart, and there's Yokozuna, and there's the Head Shrinkers and Undertaker, and I'm sitting there looking around, and I'm one of these guys, and I'm going, who would have ever thought years ago I would be sitting right here?
The real moment.
It was that moment that you're just going, man. I now my aspirations was, being 5'10", I was never at that time too. WWF was a big man it was a big man company. If you weren't 6'4", you wasn't in consideration for anything, And the reason I was there, I was a good throwing weight, I was a good throwing weight for guys like Razor Ramon and Diesel and One Man Gang and Earthquake and things of that nature. So here's the thing. I knew my role, and I knew there was probably about 10,000 other guys that wanted my spot, on the roster. And, I was there, cut my nose clean, got paid, and that's the bottom line, and so I was just, really just having a great time. And I'm wrestling, pretty much with some of the best talent on a nightly basis. I had some great matches with Owen Hart, had great matches with Randy Savage, had great matches with Kurt Hennig, and when you're on the road, night in and night out, injuries occur, and guys get hurt, and there might be a guy that's in a top spot that, hey, gets hurt. Hey, who can we pull up? And I was kind of the utility guy that they could call in. I could work the first match, or I could go in and work semi-main against Randy Savage. Right. And so it was for me. I was blessed to be there.
Yeah. Now, you brought up a good scenario when you said you called by World Wrestling Federation. Now you're building your brand for I don't like that term, but it's what everybody uses nowadays. You're building Reno Riggins, okay, and then you're doing good, you're winning matches, you're getting some fire underneath you. Then you get a call for World Wrestling Federation to come up, be enhancement talent on that end, and obviously you're going to go in and do the job for somebody on TV or whatever. Now, granted, it's a payday, but were yourself and others apprehensive to do stuff like that for fear of kind of like, I guess, like debilitating what you've built?
Sure. I was working in Memphis at the time, and I was working for the Jarretts. And but like everybody else at that point, we were all starving to death. I mean, we were getting by, but it wasn't what, I was thinking, possibly a wrestler would make, And so I was really wanting to move forward in my career financially. A lot of guys, you have to, and not to sell myself short, but I can't get that big break if I'm not in front of the right people. Right. And there was guys at the time that were wrestling in Memphis that had been there off and on for the last 10 years. And I just told myself, I just don't want to be one of those guys, and no disrespect to them. They're on a different path than I was on. So I was working in Memphis, and the WWF was coming to Nashville. And my dad has a small auto, it's a family-owned auto paint and body shop here in Nashville. So I grew up in that business as well. And so WWF was coming to town, and I thought, well, I'll go down there and I'll talk to Vince McMahon about getting a job. That's kind of how naive I was too, And so I put on a suit and tie, and I have a little portfolio of pictures and couple of tapes of matches, and just figured I just walk in and just, I guess being so naive actually kind of helped a little bit.
Right.
So I go to the back door of the municipal auditorium here in Nashville, and I see Randy Savage walking in, and I see all these wrestlers walking in, and I'm figuring I'm just going to strut right on in. Well, I get to the door, the security guy goes, "Where do you think you're going?" And so I said, "Well, I'm here to talk to Vince McMahon." So the guy runs me out, And so I go back out to my truck, and I'm sitting out there, and I'm mad, I'm dejected, I'm just, beside myself. I think I was more upset at the fact that the guy didn't think I was a wrestler than getting thrown out, So I'm sitting out there, and earlier that day, my dad had a FedEx package delivered to his shop, and the contents were already taken out. But I thought, if I hold this box this way and kind of close this end up, it's going to look like I've got a FedEx delivery. So I go to a different door.
Yeah.
Boom, 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 knock on the door. Security guy comes. He says, "Yeah, can I help you?" Of course, a different security guy. I said, "Yes, I got a FedEx delivery for Vince McMahon." He goes, "Well, give it to me and I'll give it to him." I go, No, he's got to sign for it. So here I am in a 3-piece suit with a FedEx box, no clipboard, no nothing, telling this guy I got a FedEx delivery. And the guy looks at me, he goes, "Okay, come on in." So I learned at an early age, if you kind of look like you knew what you were doing, or kind of, then people would assume that you knew what you were doing, and you could just, just march on your merry way. So I get inside, I ditch the box, and now I'm looking for Vince McMahon. And of course, I see all these guys walking back and forth, and I don't know. I've seen them all from television, but I don't know any of them, So finally, this guy comes up to me. He says, "Hey, can I help you?" He goes, "You look like you're lost." And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm here to talk to Vince McMahon about getting a job." He goes, "Well, what do you do?" I said, "I'm a wrestler." And so once again, I get highly insulted that this guy doesn't think I can wrestle. So he says, well, what's your name? And I give him my name. And he says, "Well, how long you been wrestling?" I said, "I've been wrestling 2 years." He said, "Oh, really?" And looking back at it, I was surprised the guy just didn't run me out right then, because generally a guy that's up there is going to have 4, 5, 6 years under their belts before they get to that stage. And so he said, "Well, what's your?" He said, "Well." So he's talking to me, and he says, "Well, let me ask this: who trained you?" And I said, "Tojo Yamamoto." And I don't know if you guys remember the old E.F. Hutton commercials years and years ago, but there was a commercial that said, "When E.F. Hutton talks, people listen." Well, this guy, he said, "Oh, really?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, Tojo used to be my roommate in Canada back in the 60s. And so we get to talking a little bit, and he said, "Well, what are you doing tomorrow night?" I said, "I'm doing nothing." And he said, "Well, can you come to Bristol, Tennessee?" I said, "I sure can." So I go home, pack up my stuff, call my best friend who wasn't working at the time, and I said, "Hey, we're going to Bristol tomorrow night. I need you to help me drive, right?" So here we go. We hop in the car and we go to Bristol, Tennessee, and Viking Hall. And he says, "Get there early. We'll eat at about 2, and then I'll go over who you're going to wrestle and this, that, and the other." So the guy was giving me a look-see, right? Yeah. And so it was Terry Garvin. He was the vice president of Titan Sports at the time. So I get to Viking Hall. I'm a nervous wreck. I get there early, like you said, and I see all these guys coming in that you've seen, that I've seen from television. And I'd been around, I've been around Jerry Lawler and all these other guys, but not at that time the magnitude of what WWF was. You had your regional wrestling stars, and then you had your national wrestling stars. And, Savage walks in, Ultimate Warrior walks in, Andre the Giant walks in. And I mean, you're just standing there just, oh my God, And so, here comes Demolition, Hercules Hernandez comes walking in, So he gets me at about 6 o'clock, and he says, "Hey, look, I'm going to introduce you to the guy you're going to be working with, and you guys go over your match, and good luck to you." Right. So I'm sitting in this little room, and in walks Bobby the Brain Heenan and Hercules, Ray Hernandez, and they come walking in, and of course, see Bobby Heenan on Monday prime time every Monday night hosting that show. So they walk in, two of the nicest guys you would ever want to meet. Right. I mean, two of the absolute nicest guys. Ray comes in for a big guy, jacked up, gassed to the gills, but so nice and so accommodating. And Bobby, too, was, always quick-witted and there to make you relax. They know at some point everybody in this business has been in the seat that I'm in. Right. And, you got guys that can go one or two ways with it. They can make your life miserable, or they can put you at ease and let you know, hey, we're all working together. And I just always appreciated that so much from those guys. So they came in, hey, it's going to be 4 or 5 minutes, and boom, 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 and out you go, And so, time comes up. I'm standing there at the gorilla position. I don't know if they still call that the gorilla position or not, but it's okay. I mean, so Gorilla Monsoon's sitting there it's got the monitor and the stopwatch, and he's looking at me like, "What are you doing, kid? Go!" So boom. So here I go, and I had, like I said, I've been wrestling for 2 years, but that was at that point that was the most people I had ever been in front of a wrestling crowd in Viking Hall, and it probably 8,000-10,000 people. And that was the first time I think I'd ever, because I wore trunks. I think that was the first time I'd ever felt like I was naked in front of people while I was wrestling. I was like, "Oh, there's a lot of people here." And so I get out there, and then all of a sudden, they crank up the music and the lights, and of course the theatrics wasn't like they are now, but for us back then, it was big time. You had a curtain with a big logo and some lights and music, and here they come. And so here comes, so that curtain flies back, and out comes out comes Hercules. And I'm looking at him. It looks like he's about 100 yards away from me, and they hit him with that spotlight. And he comes out, and he's got veins of popping, sweat glistening, foam's coming out of his mouth. He's got a chain wrapped around his neck. And I think at that point, that was the first time that I ever thought I've made the biggest mistake of my life. Oh, my God. And I'm looking, I'm going, and then here comes Bobby Heenan. I'm glad Bobby came, because when Hercules came out, I thought, I do not recognize that nice man I spoke with earlier back there, right? So here they come, they get in the ring, and, I was a nervous wreck. And so Ray gets out there and just absolutely proceeds to beat the ever-loving brakes off me. I've been in better street fights. He hit me with a clothesline so hard it knocked me goofy, right? And, it did. I mean, and so
in there.
So finally he puts me in the torture rack thing there, and of course you submit, and he throws me down, and he's standing there posing, they're rolling me out of the ring, and I think the referee wasn't Dave Hebner. What was that guy's name? He was around for a while, but they rolled me out of the back, and I'm still a little bit goofy, and the referee has to take me back there, sets me on a chair, so I look like someone that's just been violated, and I'm sitting over this chair like I'm all just beside myself at this point. and So Hercules and them come back, and Ray tells me, he said, "Kid, if you survive that, they've got to hire you." And I looked at him, and so I got a little bit of hope right there. But before that, I was thinking, I can just grab my bag and hit the back door. I ain't worried about money or anything at this point. And so he came back here and told me that, and that kind of encouraged me a little bit. And so there was a bit of time before they came and talked to me about the match or anything. And so my best friend, Chip Carroll, who rode up there with me, Chip came back because I couldn't get him back, back in the locker room area back then. And so I met him outside, and he looked at me and he said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" he said, "I was sitting at the very last row in the arena," and he said, "I could hear him hit you from all the way up there." He said, "I've never," because Chip and I grew up. He knew me since I was about 8 years old. He says, "I've seen you in street fights. I've seen you play football. He goes, "I've never seen you get hit that hard." And so I was looking at him, and I was like, "Yeah." I felt violated. But then Terry Garvin comes back there, and he said, "Well, kid," he said, "if you survive that, we've got to use you." He said, "Can you come to Winston-Salem tomorrow night?" And I said, "I sure can." So that gave me a little bit of encouragement. So I go to Winston-Salem the next night, and I get there, and they're going to have me work with Outlaw Ron Bass, big rough and tough Texan. That's 6'3", 320. And it was a whole different night. I get out there with Ron Bass, and he's as soft as a feather. And he told me, he says, "The rest of your career here should be this way." And it was very nice that he was he was on the downward slide of his career. He was in the fourth quarter of his career, and he wanted to pass it on, and this is how you do it. And I was forever grateful to him for not beating the ever-loving brakes off of me, And Ray that night after our match, Ray and I went out to dinner, and he bought me dinner, So it was it was a good experience. And then after Winston-Salem, they said, "Okay, kid, go home. We'll send you a booking sheet in 2 weeks." He says, "Finish up in Memphis, and we'll put you on the road." And that was about in, maybe around 88.
Right.
And so then I was, on the road and took off after that. So they flew me into where did we fly into first? A quick story on that. They flew me into Springfield, Illinois. St. Louis. Went into St. Louis, Missouri. So I get there, and I never, I've flown once or twice, but not, I wasn't a seasoned traveler like the other boys. So I get off the airplane, and they tell me, "Okay, when you get there in St. Louis, get a rental car and drive to Springfield, Illinois." So I get there, I go to the rental car counter, and they won't rent me a car. Like I was 20 years old at the time. They won't rent me a car. You got to be 25. So here I am, first day on the road, and panic has set in. So I'm calling the travel secretary there at WWF, and I'm letting her know, "Hey, they won't rent me a car. They won't rent me a car." She said, "Okay." And she was really great. She said, "Just go down to gate number such and such and wait for Terry Taylor and Hands of Stone Ronnie Garvin. And she said, and get in the car with them. They'll give you a ride over, right?" So I get there, and they're coming off the plane, and I go up to them. I go, I'm being as respectful as I can. "Hello, Mr. Taylor. Hello, Mr. Garvin. And the first thing they start doing is reaching their hands up. "What do you want me to sign?" They thought I was a fan. They were wanting an autograph. So once again, I'm upset that they don't think I'm a wrestler. I'm like, it's a recurring theme here.
Dan knows this all too well because it happened today.
So I tell them my situation, and they says, "Well, do you have a driver's license?" And I said, "Yeah." And Ryan Garvin looks at Terry Taylor. He says, "Well, we got our driver for the loop, So I drove every night.
Oh, jeez.
So they sit back in the back seat and drank beer while I drove,
Paying due.
Yes.
But to hear their stories and to kind of get road smart, as a friend of mine, Barry Horowitz, would always say, he goes, you got to get road smart, Riggins. And so to get road smart, you got a quick baptism of how to learn the ways of the road when you're on the road wrestling. And they knew all the places to stay. They knew the restaurants that you wanted to go to and the ones that you didn't want to go to, and all the gyms that treated the boys well, because you fly into a place. Some gyms back then would want to charge a daily basis. And, of course, them not already thinking that I'm a wrestler anyway, I had to go in with guys like, Ultimate Warrior. I had to go in with face name guys, because if I didn't, they're going to try to charge me, And so I would always, hey, you going to the gym? All right, let me go with you. That way I wouldn't have to pay.
Yeah.
But sometimes too, I could talk to the owner if they were a wrestling fan, then I could get them tickets and swap out that way too with them. But
now you're doing this. You're on the road with them, and you're getting the booking sheet, which is awesome. Now I'm assuming you're getting paid more than what you would have been locally.
Oh, Lord, yeah.
So you're obviously gonna milk this for as long as you can do with it, etc.
Sure.
Is there any? I mean, is it just like, hey, I'm just doing this and we're going through it? Is there any talk of saying, hey, we want to move you forward, we want to move you backward? Hey, just do what you're doing right now. That's it. Was anybody kind of like coaching you one way versus the other?
No. This was from about like 88 to 94. I had stints where I was there, and then where I'd left and went to WCW for about a year, and then I think back to Memphis, and then back to WWF. So it was where, okay, I've been there, done it, and I was looking to do a little more, wanting, because I would see them bring guys in. But here's the thing: when I was there, it wasn't like that they were bringing other guys in that were like me, my height, my athletic ability. There was a few, but few and far between. I think one of the smallest guys that they had brought in during one of the stints when I was there was 1-2-3 Kid.
Okay.
And that was an oddity to say, because everybody else there was big guys. I mean, they were like I said, 6'3" and better. Right. And if you didn't fit that mold, then no consideration was ever given.
You know what? You say 1-2-3 Kid. Right before they brought him in, he was doing some work for Global Wrestling Federation at the time.
Lightning Kid?
Yeah. It was like Lightning Kid, Steve Cox, and all them, if you remember.
Jerry Lynn.
Right.
Yeah.
And I remember watching him saying, hey, this kid's really good. But like amongst other people that were big stars at that time, Steve Cox was like the up and coming guy at the time. They were teaming him with Stan Lane, and they were working some kind of angle where he was a face, but Lane was a heel, but they were in a tag team tournament, that type of thing.
Right.
They were building a big feud there, and he was like the main thing of that GWF. The Patriot became the champion.
Yeah, Dale Wilkes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, great guy.
Not long after that, he went to WWF at that time as well.
Yes.
Not maybe a year after GWF became on TV.
He got the break of a lifetime.
Did. And then I saw Lightning Kid come in, and I'm like, oh man, yeah, I remember this kid. I remember him. And then like he does that stuff with Scott Hall, and it's like, wow, they're really giving this kid a push. Like, wow, like he is good. Don't get me wrong, but I'm like, wow, like they really saw something in him, and that's something that always amused me, or not amused me, but more so amazed me. Like you're saying at the break, how these individuals get this kind of break, and what their thought process is behind he versus you, that type of thing. I mean, you, I guess, you were like a loyal.
Sure.
And that's it, right?
Sure. A lot of guys when Sean came in were like that were in the enhancement role like I was in. They were like, that son of a gun. what has that son of a gun got that I don't have? Da this and da that. I looked at it as, hey, he's cracked the code. He's cracked. So for me, it gave hope. It gave hope that other guys of my stature could break through. And I was always, even growing up, even when I worked for WWF, I was more of a fan of WCW because they used more of what I would refer to as wrestling athletes. They wrestled, and it was treated more as a legitimate sport.
Yes.
And when I was working at WWF, and it was the circus. I always said the WWF was like the circus coming to town. And I don't mean this in any type of negative way for anybody, but my parallels to the circus and WWF was people would come see Andre the Giant to see how big he was. Well, the people who come to the circus see how big the elephants are. I'm not saying Andre's an elephant. I'm just saying that comparison of why they come see certain people.
Right.
They would come see some wrestlers that could flip, flop, and fly, just like they want to go to the circus and see the high wire act. Right. And then there was comedy, the Bushwhackers or Doink the Clown, and so the circus has comedy as well. So I always said the WWF was like the circus, whereas WCW, for the most part, you had your hardcore wrestling angles and your wrestlers. Ricky Morton, Robert Gibson. I mean, they're my size. They are the world tag champs. Yes. And of course, it's great when you had the Road Warriors, because those are the two biggest, meanest monsters on the planet, and they're going to kill those little guys. And then of course you had Arn Anderson, who goes toe-to-toe with anybody. I mean, he's just he can wrestle, he can fight, he can brawl. And when those guys spoke, you thought legitimacy just oozed out of their vocabulary. Like, hey, that guy's going to show up and he's going to beat the ever-loving brakes off Dusty Rhodes Saturday night. So there was that for me, and that's the way wrestling was here in Tennessee. When Jerry Lawler threw that strap down, man, business is on. And that's what excited or stirred people here in my area for wrestling, versus WWF's brand of wrestling was more of the of the circus, I guess. It's a different there's a different I mean, people that enjoy hardcore wrestling like I did still enjoy the circus. There's different things that you can gravitate towards and pull towards.
It's funny when you say that, though, because and I've mentioned this on our show a number of times. When I grew up in the Philadelphia area, we had World Wrestling Federation 2-3 hours on Fox 29, etc. And one year you got to remember, back then there was no internet or anything like that. So when something happened on television, it happened just then. So you just kind of viewed it at that point. And Jim Crockett Promotions comes in and buys out the Channel 17 locally time slot, which
worldwide
wrestling was with worldwide wrestling.
Yeah.
What did they replace? It was All Stars.
I think so. Wrestling All Stars was WWF. Yeah. And they replaced it with Worldwide Wrestling.
Worldwide Wrestling. So I'm tuning into my third hour of World Wrestling Federation on a Saturday, on flipping over to Channel 17, and here I'm seeing the Raging Bull Manny Fernandez beat the shit out of some kid. Forget who it was. It might have been George South or somebody. I forget. And I'm like, what is this? And I hear David Crockett, and I hear this Southern voice. Because remember, I'm used to hearing everybody from Connecticut and New York.
Right.
These Southern guys. And he beats the shit out of this guy. So I'm like, wow. And I'm a kid, And then the next thing that comes up is an interview with Ivan Koloff, and he beats the shit out of somebody during his interview. And I'm like, what is this stuff? And what am I watching? And what's going on? And it's all dark. It wasn't light, real bright, like the World Wrestling Federation. It was real dark. And then
super gritty.
But when I saw them beat the shit out of guys, and I was like, oh my God. And I'll tell this story because I've told it before. Ivan Koloff is with Crusher Khrushchev in a promo with David Crockett. He's got a Russian chain match coming up with Dusty Rhodes. So he's demonstrating the fine points of a Russian chain match. He has George South come in, and he says, I'm paying this American $20 American dollars to help me demonstrate a Russian chain match. And he hands him $20, right? So he's telling David Garvin, first you can use the chain like this, and then you can do like that. And then he turns around and he just levels south, takes him out of his boots, right?
Yeah.
Dusty Rhodes, blah, 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 and he does this thing and he walks off. And then Crusher Khrushchev leans down, grabs the $20 and walks off. And
right.
I said, like crack, I was hooked. I said, Jim Crockett Promotions is what I want to watch for the rest of my life. And then you get like David Crockett, and you get Tony Schiavone, and I'm listening to you talk, and I'm thinking to myself, even back then, because I've done promos with like Doug Gilbert and other guys like that, and I'm thinking to myself, Southern accents equal ass kicking. I don't know why that is. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know why that is, but
Pretty much.
The World Wrestling Federation, I don't think could ever deal with a Southern guy properly. But like, because in Connecticut, it's just so proper, and you know, it's just, they stick out like a sore thumb. But when I used to watch Jim Crockett, I'm like, these guys kick everybody's ass. They must get in fights no matter where they go, and they must win every fight that they get into. You know, because they have that accent.
Right. I tell you, just to add to that, I felt like guys that were the thing that made me gravitate towards liking their brand of wrestling, just as a fan, although I was in the business, was the fact that a person could lose themselves better in the fantasy of pro wrestling as a sport. Whereas this was all before it was like coined the phrase sports entertainment.
Yeah.
You know, I still hate that phrase because it's a different era, and I know that now. But from me growing up and watching wrestling, grassroots. I remember when guys used to come to the ring with no music. You just, all right, who's that coming down the aisle now? You know, you're sitting there. I'm sitting there as a kid at the fairgrounds looking who's coming down the aisle next. You know, you didn't get that pre-introduction with the music. You know, you hear the glass crack. Oh, that's Stone Cold Steve Austin. You know, or you hear the music of that's Undertaker. You know, you had to sit there and wait, and it was really suspenseful. And then I remember when I think the first guys that I ever saw that came out to music was Stan Lane and Steve Kearns of the Fabulous One.
Yeah.
And they would come out and they would have the tuxedo, the sequence tuxedo jackets and the hats and the bow ties, and here they come and the music. And so, man, that really added a bit of excitement. And so then a few months later, you start seeing Bill Dundee coming out to music, and you start seeing Jerry Lawler coming out to music, and you start seeing Dutch Mantell coming out to music, and all these guys, you know, and Tojo, who trained me, he hated it. He was so old school, you know. He hated it. He was like, I don't need that music, you know. He goes, if you need that music to come out to, people don't know who you are to begin with, you know. And it was a change, you know. You see the older guys, and then how the business was changed with that big entrance and the music. So some of the older guys like, you know, and then like in my era today, me being an older guy, I see things, you know, I don't watch the program per se as much. Now my kids, they'll watch it.
Yeah.
And so I'm going through, they'll ask me, did you ever wrestle this guy? Did you ever wrestle that guy? And some, like the older guys, yeah, I wrestled that guy and this guy. But and some of the things that they do, I just, for me, one of the things that they do that just kills me, and you guys have probably touched on this 1,000 times, is, okay, imagine this. On WWE, they'll have two guys out there in the ring, no official, nothing standing between them but two microphones. Can you imagine that happening, say, 25 years ago in a ring at WCW?
Absolutely not.
No. Because all the fans are going, well, he's there. Go smack the crap out of him, you know. It's air and opportunity. Go get him. But now, if they're going to stand out, and so for me, that is just one of the biggest turn-ons. And it's probably like how Tojo hated the music when the guys would come out. For me, that's my don't like the new era moment.
Have you listened to any of the promos recently? Like, have you listened? Like, I know you're watching it with your kids or whatever the case would be, and like you hear them talking on air. To me personally, and I say it very actively on the show, I cannot watch the World Wrestling Entertainment product because I have a lot of problems with it. The writing's bad. I don't like the way things are displayed. I don't like the booking, etc. But like, to me, whenever I hear them do promos, especially like the heel promos, they sound like bully children on a playground rather than grown men. Like, I remember as a kid when I'd watch guys like you and I'd watch guys like Magnum TA and Dusty Rhodes and Bret Hart and, you know, and even Hulk Hogan or whatever, I'm thinking to myself, these guys are men who are taking care of business. Now, granted, a lot of the talent's a lot younger than I am now, but I don't look at them as men because their promos come off as children. Like, I want to like correct them or scold them or discipline them in a sense based on the way they're acting versus saying, oh my God, he's so badass, he's going to kick this guy's ass or whatever, because it seems like very childish. Now, do you think that's the targeted audience versus like what they're going for?
I think they have a direction there at WWE, and there's a narrative. To me, there doesn't seems to be. I mean, everything seems to be like to the word precise. Whereas years ago, you know, they would say, you know, if you're going to do an interview, this is the points that we're wanting to make. Give you about 30 minutes to figure it out, and we're going live. And so the wrestler, and so he's going to put it in his point of view of what he thinks he needs to say, and that spontaneity. And I feel like the wrestling industry, or WWE at least, has taken that away from the wrestlers. And so basically, you could just set puppets out there and get, you know, I guess get their point across. But like you said, you know, I watch it. And I'm not challenging anybody's toughness or anything like that. I'm just telling you from what I see and what I watch. But what I watch and what I see, I'm sitting there thinking, I don't see a legitimate tough guy. Now, I'm 51 years old. Yeah, these guys beating me up every which way till Sunday, you know. But I'm watching and I'm going, there's not a legitimate tough guy there. I would hear guys talk on an interview, and they were so convincing. You know, Jake Roberts, back when he was at Georgia Championship Wrestling, some of the best interviews in the business, you know. Even Flair back then, of course, he was so, you know, way and over the top back then. He had legitimacy. You know, I go back to Arn Anderson, you know, giving great interviews, and guys that could deliver like that and tell that story. And you're sitting there thinking at home, oh my God, the Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer and Wildfire Tommy Rich, that's going way back right there. I mean, you're sitting there thinking those guys Saturday night at the Omni, someone will die. Those guys hate each other that way. And so as a fan, you're sitting there watching it and you're going, that could legitimately happen, you know? And they helped, that helped so much suspend the imagination of the fans to really, man, I gotta buy a ticket to that, you know. And I always felt like, as a wrestler and as a performer, that you've got to do a few things to get the people to get involved. First off, you have to get them emotionally involved with what you're doing. I mean, if they're just passing through and they just see a couple of guys, you know, I'm going to beat you up. Well, you're not going to beat me up, or you're messing with my girl manager. That is, no one wants to hear that. No one wants to hear that. But if you go, let me tell you something, punk. If you come down there Saturday night and you happen to have the guts to get your butt in the ring with me, I'm gonna make a promise right here on national television. And when they start speaking that way,
yeah,
to emotionally suck you in, then they're gonna make that emotional decision to go and buy a ticket.
Right.
So you have to get them emotionally involved so they can emotionally go and buy a ticket. That's what wrestling is. That's what you want them to do.
I think a lot of it has to do with the WWE wanting to control their product. Because if you go back and look at a Roddy Piper, Roddy Piper made Roddy Piper. Okay.
Yes.
And WWE could not own that or control that. You know, the same thing with your Greg Valentines, the same way with your, if you think of anybody else that came out, like a Tito Santana or whoever you want to pull in there, who was over the top, maybe the Moondogs or whatever. They are who they are.
Yeah.
Very possible, and I look at it like this, that they control what they say, so that whatever they build, if you don't work out for whatever reason, you got to start over someplace.
Right.
You're not going to take what we built here and go someplace else, which is a little bit of selfishness, but it's a business, I guess.
Yeah, right.
But I always wondered, and we always say this, if some of these guys could just do old school, like you said, and say, hey, here's the point we want to get. We go live in 30, go right ahead and work something out.
Sure.
How amazing some of these characters could be.
Well, I agree. I feel like, someone asked me maybe a year or so ago if how I feel like I would do in today's company. And if I was in today's company and given a push, I think I would have been just absolutely miserable. Just due to the fact that you have no creativity. Right. You're basically just reading a script and, okay, I've got to say this, and this. And those guys, I feel, probably under a lot of pressure to go out there and say this, and this without really putting a bit more, having a bit more freedom to say these points, but say them in their own dialect or their own character or their own twist on it.
Give some the words that they're being fed.
Yeah.
It's just, and like you said earlier, it's like they're all talking like a bunch of bullied kids. I'm wondering how many of the writers, and I don't know who their writers are. I don't know. And I'd like to know, like, how many, like, physical altercations they've ever been in their life.
Right.
Because it's tough to tell somebody you're going to beat their hind end if you've never done it.
Yes.
Another. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Another current thing though is the wellness program. Do you think that back in your day, the 80s, you said 88 to 92, they were kind of Ultimate Warrior, Hercules Hernandez, Randy Savage. Then the steroid trial of 91 came up with Vince McMahon, and he was kind of forced to go a different direction with the Shawn Michaels, the Bret Harts, the 1, 2, 3 kids. Do you think that had something to do with maybe the current state of the product? I mean, the wellness program, of course, was, I guess, to help concussions, steroid use, cocaine, marijuana, what have you. Do you think that kind of led into why the product is so, I guess, concentrated with why they control everything? They control promos, they control TV time, they control matches. Do you think that it kind of had an effect from the late 80s coming to the current product?
As far as their product on TV and all that issue with their wellness program, I really don't know if there's a true connection there. Now, like I said, I don't follow their product that close, but from what I've heard, now this is just hearsay, so take it for what it's worth. But I hear that they don't travel as much as their road isn't nowhere near as what it was years ago. Like in the late 80s and early 90s. I remember in the early 90s, we would have 4 shows going just about every night. You'd have an A team, B team, C team, and D team. And you would have, one your A team's at Madison Square Garden, B team is in Indianapolis, and then your C team might be at what's the one in Scranton, Pennsylvania? It's the boys club there. But it's like a 4,000 seat arena. I mean, just you got your 20,000 seat arenas, your 10,000s, your 8s, and your 5s, and so every night there was, shows going on, and guys on the road and guys miserable and cranky and, I think the road does that to a lot of guys. I mean, it challenges them physically and mentally and emotionally. Whereas, and then of course you have a lot of guys that turn towards alcohol and drugs during that time. And like I said, it's one. Some guys are going to live the fast life, regardless. Hey, don't touch that pot. It's hot. Don't touch it. What are they going to do? They're going to grab it with both hands. You can't stop them. And so I think they're smart people there, and so I think they've seen that and says, look, we've kind of worked these guys like pack mules. Let's don't do that, so we don't have continued issues with our wrestlers falling into the world of alcohol and drugs. And one of the things that I've kind of always said was from guys that were of my time that I was there. Some guys, are going to have drug problems. Some guys are going to battle addiction, but it's when they get away from being a pro wrestler. And years ago, back in the early 90s, I had the greatest job in the world. Who doesn't want to go out to a 10,000 seat arena and have people cheer your name or boo you? It's such an adrenaline rush, and there's not a drug on this planet that matches it. So imagine that's your job every night. You go out and people are cheering your name or booing your name, and you get that adrenaline rush of that live performance, and all of a sudden it's gone. Your day in the spotlight is gone. What do you do now? What do you do now to get that same rush that you got for the last 8 or 10 years being on national television and hearing people cheer your name every night at 8 o'clock? What do you do? And so you have a lot of guys that, I'm a failure. Although that they've had probably a tremendous, great wrestling career, they go, well, what do I do now? No one wants to book. This is all that they know.
Right.
And it's I've seen a lot of friends of mine turn to drugs and alcohol. I've seen a lot of guys that are, in their 40s, no longer with us. And so I think that there is a correlation to the two. That's just my 2 cents on that subject. I wish I was a lot smarter to figure that out, because there was a lot of great guys that, like I said, are no longer with us that the wrestling world still needs to have around. But that's just my 2 cents on that. I had an old tag partner, Stephen Dunn, who wrestled for WWE. He was with Well Done.
Well done.
Yeah.
And so, and Steve and I, we teamed up in the late 90s, and we did a lot of local and independent wrestling.
At the Volunteers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of fun. We did a local program here in Nashville called Music City Wrestling. And we had, some guys that went on to do some great things. One of the Hardy Boys, Jeff Hardy was with us. And it was a lot of fun. And that's where I got to start to be a bit more creative. And my character is Reno Riggins, and what I did. I wasn't the guy that was going to come out with fire blowing out of my ears or anything like that. And I wanted to be like guys like Ricky Morton and Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard, and the guys that, gave a great promo, and the guys got in the ring and backed it up. That was that's who I wanted to be. That's Ric Flair. That's who you wanted to be. You wanted to be a guy that could go and deliver. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat could go into the ring and deliver. And that's who inspired me, guys like that. And so
do you think guys like that actually are not sought after nowadays? Like, if you brought that to the table, right? Let's say you go in there as a rookie.
Sure.
But you have that. You encapsulate an Arn Anderson. Are they going to sit there and say, you think, oh my God, we hit the mother load? Or are they going to sit there and say, well, how do we work with this guy? Because that's not the way our business is anymore.
That's a great question. That's a great question. It's speculation on my part to say one way or the other. I hope for more guys like that in the industry, and I hope. And there's probably guys like that now, but they just don't have the freedom to express themselves, in on the biggest stage, which is the WWE. They're the biggest stage, and I wonder if anytime Vince McMahon, I doubt it though. I wonder if Vince McMahon ever just sits there and goes, looks back and go, "What have I done?" He's basically squashed. He's squashed this industry so he could have it all himself. And I doubt he ever says, I regret doing this, that, and he may. I always liked working for Vince, so I don't know. But just put yourself in Vince McMahon's shoes, and you've conquered all, and there's nothing left to conquer. There's no adversary. There's, when I don't know. I mean, he's on a different plane. He's a lot smarter than I am, and he was probably one of the nicest guys that I'd ever worked for, too. I say that. You hear some guys, well, Vince McMahon, he's this, that, and the other. Let me tell you, Vince McMahon, his company gave me an opportunity when no one else would, paid me more money than anybody else ever did. And he asked me to do a job, and I did it. And he paid me and paid me well. So, my cousins on TV who lived out in Los Angeles at the time, they would, I'd be on the road and we'd touch base, and they'd say, "They never let you win on TV. How come?" I go, "Well, let me tell you, when I go to the bank, they don't ask me, 'Sir, did you win or lose?' They say, 'Sir, may I help you?'"
Right, and I get that. I picture Vince McMahon like at his desk with action figures, people and stuff like that. And then when somebody walks in, he quickly swipes them off the table.
Spaceballs.
Yeah, like Spaceballs, But
right.
Now, here's a cool thing. What's his face from the Smashing Pumpkins? Billy Corgan. He buys the NWA. Okay.
Right.
And he was in an interview not that long ago, and he said, "Listen, the WWE is a multi-billion-dollar entity. There is no number two. There is no number two.
Right.
So if you try to be a number two, you're going to fail, because unless you have that kind of money to match, It's not going to happen." So he said that what he wanted to do, and what he's hoping other companies will do, is that, like, hey, let's just do our thing. And it kind of harkens back to something that Paul Heyman said. I can't do this. I can't do this. So therefore, rather than do that poorly, I'm going to do what I can awesome. Okay.
Sure.
And hence we had ECW, which was a big thing. And,
Sure.
And what I'm noticing is, and I kind of said this before, is that in a certain way, territories are coming back, in a sense that all the independents are getting together and they're saying, hey, let's just collaborate. Let's get our stuff together. Let's get our stuff shown. So it's an alternative to this world wrestling entertainment that's out there. Because I don't think WWE is putting out a wrestling show anymore. I think they're putting out, like you said, a sports entertainment show, and then everybody else is dealing with wrestling.
Right.
If you watch Impact, if you watch ROH, if you watch now Ring Warriors and stuff like that, they're all interchanging talent. Everybody's going from everywhere. So unlike before, where you might have been with Jim Crockett for 6 months or whatever the case would be, wherever your stint was, and you did whatever your thing, and you're building yourself over there, these guys now have the capability to get on TV no matter where they get booked. So you got guys like who I think is the biggest heel in this business right now is Sami Callihan. I think bar none. You can even include, if you want to include guys in the WWE, I will put them against Sami Callihan as far as an overall heel status, bar none. He is like the top guy. But he's seen in Impact Wrestling. He's seen in Major League Wrestling. He's seen in a couple other regional ones that we don't have television on the East Coast for. He's on the Jericho Cruise. He was doing stuff. He's doing stuff in Mexico. He's making, it seems like the way they're able to do it now, they're able to build themselves in a quicker time frame, where it may take you 10 years in the 80s. It'll take you 5 years now. But the problem is, though, I think they're burning out a lot quicker, because you have to keep an intensity no matter where you go, because you're on television all the time.
Right.
So, and then also as a fan, So there's, all right, I'm tired of seeing Sami Callihan. He's on every fucking show, blah, blah, blah. He's fighting everybody, whatever. So you kind of, on a fan standpoint, you get burned out as well. But I think that's, once again, the nature of the business. But let me ask you this, coming from that old school. Now, granted, you're going to probably say this as a 51-year-old versus a rookie, but are you going to sit there and say, listen, I'll let WWE write whatever the fuck they want me to say, whatever you want me to do, and I'm just going to do it, collect my check, and go home? Or for you, is it going to be like, I'd rather do that travel and be in these multiple feds and say on the underground, Reno Riggins is this monster that's traveling the world, traveling the country?
Sure. I think it kind of depends on what a person's motivation is. If they can make a good living being on the independent scene, and depend if they're young in their career, it's a good thing to do, because it helps them with a lot of it just helps them become a more rounded wrestler, and they're getting different ideas and things from an open source of ideas. From, you go this one promotion, hey, we're kind of doing things this way. You go this one, we're doing things this way. And then you can look back and sit back and compare the two. Well, hey, I liked what they did here, but not here. And I like that, but not that. And so you can continue to add things to your repertoire. And then also, too, you're going to get exposed to some wrestlers over here that, man, I really liked what that guy did with that. I think I might borrow that. And then like what this guy did here with this company, and I'm going to blend it there. And so I feel like if you're just looking at it truly as an art form, and because that's, I mean, you're an artist, in a certain way. I hate to use that kind of term as well, but maybe it's politically correct, I guess. I don't know. But you can take inspirations and ideas from different places. Although when you're at WWE, it's pretty much cut and dry, and this is what it is, and this is what you're going to do. And I don't know what their actual life expectancy or what their career expectancy is there. Is it 24 months, 36 months, 12 months? Right. And it's kind of, but here's the thing. Eventually, that person that's doing all these other things with these independents, eventually they've got to get there. They've got to get that national spotlight. They've got to get, because, I mean, if that's their brand, of course, when they get to WWE, they're going to get rebranded because Vince wants to own the rights of that image.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to take the good with the bad there, and then maybe later on that springs into other opportunities when you're no longer wrestling, like a reality TV show or a podcast show, or other opportunities that you can possibly collect some funds on. It just helps. It helps open up the doors to other revenue streams when you get older and can no longer physically take tickles and tackles.
Is this a safe assumption? I don't want to say assumption, but I look at it like this, where I see guys that are in World Wrestling Entertainment versus guys that move off. And we can use Cody Rhodes as a very good example. Sure. Cody Rhodes obviously had his spot in WWE. Whether it was here, whatever, that man was never going to not have to work, okay, based on his family alone. Now, he decides, let me leave WWE, and I'm going to do things my way. And what does he do? He becomes the NWA World Champion. He makes a major name for himself. He gets out of his father's shadow, in a sense, and really creates something for himself. Is it a safe assumption that potentially people who love this business for what it is, you, me, etc., you take some of the older guys like Valiant and Rhodes and Magnum TA and stuff like that, versus some of these guys who are out there now. Do you think the guys that are at WWE are like, well, I'm going to collect a paycheck? Do you think they maybe don't have the same passion for wrestling as they do for being in the WWE? Because I think it's a different scenario.
Sure. I think that I mean, of course, I can't speak for someone, but I can give you my interpretation of what I feel like might be going on there. If they have a different passion, they have a different thing that drives them, and what that is, because they didn't see, they didn't grow up watching Georgia Championship Wrestling. They didn't grow up watching Jerry the King Lawler. They didn't grow up watching, just a one light over a ring and the rest of the building dark. They grew up watching the big entrances, the big music, the light show, the over-the-top spectacular. That's what they grew up watching.
Yeah.
So anything less than that, would be like, well, what the heck is this? It'd be I feel like it'd probably be such a disappointment for them. But when I was growing up, I mean, like I said, you had the one light over the ring, you had no music. And so by the time, I mean, as a young kid watching wrestling, then by the time that I got to the WWF, man, there's 20,000 people here. There's lights. I think back then we still just had the curtain, but had the WWF logo over the curtain there. Yeah. And that was big time, and just to see how it continues to evolve with the spectacle of the whole production, as I've always been kind of entertained with. However, still, it all happens inside the ring. If you can't deliver inside the ring, all that other garbage that you just spent mega millions of dollars on means absolutely nothing. Right. You could take a $1 million jewelry box, but if you open it up and there's a turd in it, guess what it is? It's still a turd. Right?
Right.
So the $1 million jewelry box at that point doesn't really mean a whole lot.
Right.
So
is spot wrestling killing wrestling?
Is what?
Spot wrestling killing wrestling? You know what I mean?
Spot wrestling?
Yeah.
I would like to see somebody just grab a Holt every now and then. Just grab a Holt, work the arm, bring some logic to while we're doing what we're doing, and every of course, when you're watching TV, and even back when I was there, TV matches were different than house show matches. House show matches, all right, we want you to go out there. You got 20 minutes with Tatanka, and and so I'm wrestling Tatanka every night for 20 nights in a row. So you pace yourself, you grab Holtz, and you work a match. Television, you got to get after it, because it's so easy for a person sitting there with a remote control in their hand. If I'm working that arm for the last 4 or 5 minutes, that's an opportunity for them to click. And that's what I was taught. When you're doing a TV match, it is action nonstop. It's action nonstop. And then when you're doing house show matches, that's when you can work the arm and do work some holds. But on some of these pay-per-views, they get after it a bit. But if they're having to go a little bit of time, then you'll see them grab a hold, and that's fine too. But as far as just your television matches, it's spot, and it's a lot of just tick tackle and run. We used to in Japan. We used to just say, well, there's no logic there. They just do spot after spot after spot after spot, and which didn't make sense for us because we worked a different style. And then, of course, in the South, that we worked a different style in Tennessee than we did. We did a lot of what we called Shakespeare, a lot of walking and talking, a lot of anticipation. Tojo Yamamoto was great at this one thing. He would be a manager. They'd throw somebody out on the floor, and he would start looking. The heel distracts the referee, and then Tojo starts looking around like, is anybody watching? And just that reaction alone did more than if he'd walked over there and hit the guy overside the head with a hammer. He's looking around. He's like reaching into his coat pocket. And the slower he went and the more deliberate he went, the louder the crowd got. And that was what you're trying to do, to draw a reaction from the fans. And if you just go over and hit him in the head with a hammer. Well, you hit him in the head with a hammer. But if the people feel like that they helped the guy not get hit in the head, because the louder they would get, the more they'd scream to the referee, and then finally Tojo would be right there to get him, and then the referee would turn back around and he would sit like he's done nothing. Just that alone, that anticipation of something getting ready to happen, I feel like that is an art form that guys don't use anymore. The referee's got his back turned. I'm going to go over and hit him with the chair. I don't think WWE does that anymore, but I'm going to go over and hit him with something, I don't think they have any. You got to have rules in the match, and you got to have some guidelines. I don't even think they do that anymore. It's just, anything goes. Then why even have the referee out there? He's just out there for dressing. I don't know. But I get fired up. I get fired up on that.
As you should, like we do.
I go on I try and find independent wrestling to watch, and I go on YouTube and I try and find federations. And I saw something came up. Somebody on Facebook who does belt manufacturing. They said, "How do you like our new AWA World Title belt?" I said, "Oh, look at this belt. Very nice looking belt." I said, "The AWA is coming back." Okay, cool. Let me check it out. So I look it up. And it comes on. It turns out you were the commissioner.
Oh, yes.
Okay. And I'm watching it, and I'm thinking, this is awful Southern for being the AWA. Right? And I'm like, what's going on here? And I'm watching a little further up there. And then I realized it wasn't the American Wrestling Association. It was the American Wrestling Alliance. So I'm like, oh, wait, these sons of bitches, they just baited me in.
They got you.
I said, this ain't the AWA. So you come out and they crowned, you were crowning the world champion. I think it was like in the first couple episodes or something like that.
All right.
And you might remember this. It was Rob Conway versus, who was the guy? Damian
Wayne?
Damian Wayne, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm like, yeah, this guy likes Batman. I realize it. I'm like, okay. And Rob Conway comes in, and I had to laugh because he's sitting there and he's like, I just want to say it's an honor that I'm able to go for such a prestigious title, blah, 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 and I'm going to be the first AW. Well, if you're going to be the first one, how the fuck is it so prestigious? Nobody's held it yet. Like, I don't know where the prestige came from because nobody's held this title yet. It was a beautiful belt. But little stuff like that. Do you get like that? And then like, you're like, yeah, like I did a couple shots and then boom, it was done. Over.
Yeah. Yeah, it sometimes, and a friend of mine, Tim Thomason, who actually I worked with years ago. We started a little small promotion here in Nashville called Showtime All-Star Wrestling, and it was kind of a throwback to that old studio style of wrestling, and it was the budget was absolutely zero, so, and that's the thing too, that a lot of folks have to take a little bit into consideration is the fact that, because I would see independent shows and I would see a lot of different things and you're going, well, why are they doing this? Or why are they doing that? And yada, yada, yada. And the thing is, once you fully understand the finances behind it, then excuse me, then you have a full understanding of why they did that or why they did this, and it's unfortunate that you have a lot of people that are out with little independent wrestling internet programs, and that's fine. I share their passion for the business, and not to make a knock on them, because you got to make mistakes. You've got to make mistakes to learn from them. And if you're not making any mistakes, then you're not learning or growing, as a wrestler or as a TV producer or cameraman or whatever your role is with the company. And that's what's so great about this business is that nobody knows everything that there is to know about this business. Every day you learn something. I was in a locker room one time and I'm sitting there talking with Ric Flair. And I asked him, and this was back in the early 90s. And after he had really had his big run through the 80s. And and just I kind of felt like, man, this guy's in the fourth quarter of his career. He's on the downslope now. But he was still getting after it and going an hour every night. And I said, Rick, let me ask you a question. I said, what keeps you motivated? What keeps you going? He goes, well, you don't know everything about it. He says, every day I learn something new. And here's the guy that in my eyes knew it all, as a wrestler. This guy has done it all. He's not only climbed the mountain, he's done set up camp at the top of the mountain and stand on top. And I'm sitting there thinking, he's saying, every day you learn something new. And so when I heard that,
6 ex-wives, so.
Well, yeah, he's maybe he knew something that I didn't. He still had a few more wives to go through, I guess. But every day you learn something new, And so I always enjoyed that challenge of knowing that although Vince McMahon is very successful, he still doesn't know everything, and that's encouraging, even for the guys doing a one camera independent wrestling program shoot. They are striving to get better at what they're doing, and some are good, some are bad, and that's just But the thing is, even the bad ones, you have to respect that those guys are going out on a limb and trying to do the best that they can. And it's easy to for me, it's easy to sit back and disagree or criticize and things of that nature. But I've been one of those guys that's set at the gorilla position on a lot of small independent wrestling programs. And okay, guys, we want to do this. And for me, it makes a little bit of sense of why we're doing something. And for them, some guys, they have no absolute clue why you do things like that. And so hopefully, not like I said, not that I know everything, but if I know a little bit, I can tell somebody that doesn't know anything and help them get further down the road, and hopefully make it a little bit better than when I leave than what I found it, But getting back to the AWA, my friend Tim Thomason, he helped me when I had a little program here in Nashville called Showtime All-Star Wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's got some matches and whatnot on YouTube. And we would tape 2 or 3 episodes, like on a Saturday night to get TV footage in. And we were on cable access. And then finally I went over to the WB network with our show and said, hey, can we talk about getting on? And the guy just so happened, a friend of mine, Michael Hook, who he became a friend of mine, but he liked wrestling. And he says, yeah, I'll put you on. And we were on Saturday nights at 8:00, prime time.
Nice.
And so we went from cable access to prime time Saturday nights here in Nashville. And then we said, well, if we got to put, and we were drawing some good numbers. And so then we started bicycling the tape out on a few syndication, small syndication deals. And I think at one point we were like on 30 or 40 channels, and they were small channels, but the production quality was pretty good. And, for it to be an independent type of deal, I was really, really proud of it. And like our production budget was like $2,000 an episode.
Right.
And so, for what you're financially investing and what you were getting back was, we were spending pennies and getting back diamonds, in my opinion.
Wow.
So, and we had some good wrestlers come through here, and a lot of neat things, and a lot of fun stuff. So you check out some of the old stuff on that and critique it. It was a lot of fun to do.
YouTube name?
Yeah, should be.
Okay.
Should be Showtime All-Star Wrestling.
When you're booking for that, are you just basically saying, listen, can you wrestle and can you have a Southern accent? Because I think that's all I would need.
What's that now?
I said, if I was booking, would you be looking and say, hey, can you work and do you have a Southern accent?
You have a Southern accent.
That's all I need you to do.
All right, I have a quick question because I know we're going to be having to wrap this up pretty soon.
Yeah.
What is the one match that you wish you could have had before you left every promotion?
before I left every promotion.
Always that one guy in WWF that you wish you wrestled. There's the guy in the South you wish you got. Everybody has that, and I can only imagine what you can pull up.
Well, that I could have wished I could have wrestled in a certain type of match, or just a certain individual that I wished I could have worked with.
You could have worked with.
I don't know, because I probably worked with everybody. I mean, if you name it, from the late '80s to the '90s, there's probably a wrestler that I haven't worked with.
Nice.
I guess maybe the only one may have been. I worked with him too. I mean, you go Hogan. I mean, you sit there and think about, well, what's the Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling in you guys' opinion? Let's just start there and work our way down. I mean, who would be on your Mount Rushmore?
I guess Flair.
Okay, wrestle him.
Flair, and then just duplicate him.
Since this is harder to do because you've basically done it, what would have been the match you like? Would it be a street fight with Junkyard Dog or whoever?
Sure. You know, I think, well, looking back, I mean, I wrestled Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty and Rock and Roll and Flair and Arn and Tully and Hogan, Ultimate Warrior.
Did you prefer singles wrestling versus tag team wrestling? Or
I like tag team wrestling. They're towards into my deal with WWF. Me and Barry Horowitz teamed up, and we worked with the Smoking Guns a lot. Okay. And there was one match that we did. They were getting ready for a big pay-per-view, and it was the Smoking Guns with Tatanka against me, Barry Horowitz, and Brooklyn Brawler. And I tell you what, you sit there and if you look at that on a poster, you go, that's not going to draw you a dime. But as far as having a match, as far as back then for their TV matches, it was one of the best TV matches that they had in a while. It was a lot of action, a lot of flip-flop flying, a lot of excitement, and it achieved the goal of getting those guys ready for a big pay-per-view, and that was our job, and we accomplished it. So I always looked back at that as being pretty proud of that television match. And another television match that I had that I was really proud of was a Monday Night Raw that I wrestled Tatanka at the Manhattan Center when we used to do Monday Night Raw at the Manhattan Center. And I love that place. It was probably seated 3,000, 3,500 people. It was small, compact. The people were right on top of you. A lot of enthusiasm, a lot of energy from the crowd, just being that close and intimate. And that was when we was, doing live, and that was a big thing back then, because we would tape our matches, and, if you screwed something up, Vince would send you back out there to have the same exact match in front of 10,000 people. So if that doesn't smarten people up, I don't know what does. But, people sit there scratching their head like they're in the Twilight Zone or something, So, I'll give you a quick story. Barry Horowitz went out there and had a match with somebody, and came back, and something didn't happen the way Vince wanted, and he sent him back out there. And Barry goes, Vince McMahon says, go back out there, have the same exact match. And Barry says, isn't that going to smarten up everybody in the building? And Vince goes, I'm not worried about these 10,000 people here, Barry. I'm worried about the 100 million watching at home. And I looked at it, and that opened my eyes to, like, you know what? There is a bigger picture here. And so it just, but
let me ask you this: as far as enhancement talent's concerned,
yeah,
there's guys that we know. Barry Horowitz, just mentioned, George South, Rocky King,
Iron Mike Sharp,
Iron
Mike, yes, sir.
Now, these are guys that literally are as famous to a wrestling fan as a Hulk Hogan.
Right.
With Flair. But these are guys that, quote unquote, never won on TV. Going back to what you said earlier in the hour, where you're like, my friends are like, oh, I never get to see you. Yeah. Was there a thing to say, all right, listen, if you're going to be an enhancement talent and you're going to put somebody over, we need you to do it a certain way. We need to obviously there's a strategy to it.
Sure.
What makes you, and I'm saying you in general, what makes you stand out versus the lambs to slaughter that we would see week to week that you never heard of again?
I think just some of it, kind of knowing what our job was, embracing it, and maybe having a little bit of talent. And a lot of the guys that you refer to, the lambs of slaughter, they were super young guys just trying to get their foot in the. I mean, just we may have had a little bit more of a step, a little bit more seasoned and balanced, and and I'll tell you too, the difference between and I know I'll get crushed for this, but I can just speak from my own personal experience. But the difference between a Shawn Michaels and a George South. And this is a big statement, I know I'm going to get beat up for it, but I can just from my own experience, the difference between a Shawn Michaels and a George South is this right here. You'll see that?
Yeah.
There's a pen. That's the only difference.
Yeah.
George South is every bit as talented as an Arn Anderson or as a Tully Blanchard. Those guys were the ones that got the break. And ran with it and did a great job, But if a guy like a George South got that opportunity, in a company, could have done as equal as a job, I feel like when the WWE went from, like you said earlier, when they went from the big guys and started going to the smaller guys, I was hoping that I would get the call back at that point to come and work with the Chris Jerichos and the Benoits and the Dean Malenkos and the Eddie Guerreros and things of that nature. And we actually got called back. Me and Steve, we were doing a tag deal, and we got called to come work with the Hardy Boys. And so we went. Jim Cornette called us and said, "Hey, do you want to come work with the Hardys?" And they're looking for a team to work with them. And we was like, "Oh my God, yes," And so we went up and worked with those guys and had a TV match. And I felt like it was a very strong television match for us to have never worked together before. And had a real good match and thinking, man, this could be good for all four. And actually it was good for the Hardys, but not necessarily good for me and Steve because they, for some reason or another, didn't take us.
That when Smoky Mountain was on WWE television?
No. It may. No. I don't think so. I might be wrong on that. But Jeff Hardy had been working a bunch of independents, and he may have worked from Smoky Mountain a bit. I'm not certain. But this was when him and his brother were tag teaming, and I'd known his brother from years ago doing jobs at WWF when I was there.
Okay.
Earlier, like in the early 90s. And so I thought, well, I know those guys, I work, and we can have a real good match. And we did. We had a really, really good match. And I was feeling pretty confident about it. I was feeling like, hey, we nailed it. And just, a week or so later, I called Jim Cornette, and Jim just said, no, they're not biting. So, because I was hoping Jimmy would manage us to be a new team and we could work with the Hard. But the bottom line that I found out was that Vince McMahon does not like tag team wrestling.
No, at all.
And that is it's not a priority for him. And unfortunately, it just didn't work out. I felt like we could have had a tremendous run with those guys, and it could have splintered off to a few other things. Because then probably and like Shawn, not that I'm Shawn Michaels or anything like that, but he had a great run as one of the Rockers, and then splintered off as a singles wrestler. And then I would have hoped after I'd had a decent run with the tag team that I could have splintered back off to singles wrestling.
Right.
So
at the end of the day, as long as you got paid, right? That's what Ronnie Garvin said. He said, you know what? Somebody asked him, they said, listen, what was it like when you became the world champion? He said, you know what? One day I went in, they handed me the belt and said, you're the champion. A month later, they asked for the belt back, and I gave it back to them. Yes, that was one of us. So
Yeah.
So this was a great time. We can go on for hours and hours and hours. I gotta end it at some point. Such a great time talking with you, Reno. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Awesome talk.
Thanks for the invite. I'm highly flattered that people remember me and my wrestling days, and I am very thankful for the opportunity to get on and tell a little bit of my story and a little bit of the wrestling experiences that I had, and just really had a good time. Hope to do it again sometime.
Absolutely,
we're
I will.
absolutely gonna
I'll
have you
book you
back
next
on.
week. No, it's fantastic. I really do appreciate it. Now, for you fans out there at home, go on DJB Productions. You're going to subscribe to the channel. You'll be able to see those shows on there. We have That Way Cool Wrestling Show. Also on the channel is DJs After Dark, as well as Capes Not Included, along with myself and LeGrand Jackson. So you're going to want to check that out as well. And then obviously go on to all the Facebooks. Yeah, we have That Way Cool Wrestling Show and also thatwaycoolwrestlingshow.com. On podcast format, all courtesy of Anchor.fm. We're on Spotify. We're on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, Caster,
Twitter.
Radio Blast, and much, much more.
Twitter.
Oh, yeah, Twitter. TWCWS Podcast. I never.
Oh, there he goes. You got
it. I have to write that shit down because I can never read it. And it's my own thing. Check that out on there. Get the subscriptions up. Subscribe on the Twitter. We throw this stuff on there as well. We want to hear from you. If you guys want to hear anything, if you want to see anybody, if you want to ask questions, just go on, check it out. I'll be happy to do that on here. This show is going to be up in just a few minutes right on YouTube, so you'll be able to check that out. And I'll share it all over Facebook, as Mark will tell you. Right? Mark will tell you, I'm a promote monster. So for Reno Riggins, thank you so much for coming on. LeGrand Onslaught Jackson, Mad Mark Lindsay, my name is Dane Jay. Until next time, we'll see you at the matches. Goodbye, everybody.
The proceeding was produced by DJB Productions. Go to www.thatwaycoolwrestlingshow.com.